Hello and welcome back to the daily summer series from Inspiring Workplaces. We've had different topics every single day throughout July and heading into early August too. And now we've got a different format for today, less of me, which is probably a very good thing. We have a fireside chat all around measuring the employee experience with two fantastic people on the other side of the pond. Hosting this fireside chat will be work culture evangelist from Culture Amp, Damon Klotz, and he'll be chatting to the SVP of Talent, Barb Bidan from Peloton. So please welcome the guests today. Hello.
Hey, Matt.
Hello.
Hey, everybody. How are you doing?
Great, thanks.
Great.
Fantastic. Well, as I said, less of me today, so I'm going to hand over to you for your chat, and we'll be back when you're finished.
Brilliant.
Sounds good.
All right. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be having this conversation with you today. My name is Damon Klotz, and I'm the work culture evangelist at Culture Amp. And today, like Matt said, I'm in conversation with Barb Bidan, the SVP of Global Talent at Peloton. So, Barb, thanks for having this conversation with me.
I'm excited to talk today.
So before we dive into the conversation, I want to answer two questions that you might have. The first one's probably, what's a work culture evangelist? And then secondly, what does Culture Amp do? Those who are unfamiliar with Culture Amp, we are the leading people and culture platform that helps companies take action to improve employee engagement, retention, and performance. And Culture Amp is really built on two core ideas. We help you drive the performance and development of your organization by helping you collect, understand, and then most importantly, act on your employee feedback around areas like engagement and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then secondly, for organizations to thrive, you need the individuals in your organization to thrive. So we also have Culture and Performance to drive the development and performance of individuals within your organization. So that is as much as I'm going to be talking about Culture Amp and our product. If you want to learn more, you can certainly head to our website. But to give you a quick little background about me, I actually joined Culture Amp in 2015 as one of our first employees. And I brought my experience of working as a HR professional in Australia, as well as in marketing roles to help scale Culture Amp from a few employees and only one office to now nearly 3,000 customers and over 400 employees currently not residing in our 4 empty offices in San Francisco, New York, London, as well as our HQ of Melbourne, Australia. So I did say I wanted to say what is a work culture evangelist, because I will admit it is a strange title, but what my role is really around having and holding space for conversations to create a better world of work. And I really do that as through the main medium of our Culture First podcast, where I've been having conversations with people like Claude Silver and Doreen McKesson about leadership, about HR strategy, about employee activism, because I truly believe that we can be one conversation away from a better experience at work. So today I'm going to be talking to Barb about employee experience. And, when I think about employee experience, it spans from recruitment to onboarding to just the everyday experience that you have as an employee. And it should be inclusive, and it should also be really intentional, because when done right, it can spark engagement, foster innovation, boost productivity, and really reinforce the idea of psychological safety. So in a word, your employee experience is everything. And what's fascinating about this conversation today is we're going to be diving into a company who has been through a tremendous amount of growth and also change over the last few months to really understand how has that employee experience been. So, Barb, before we kind of dive into our fireside chat, I wanted to sort of reflect on something with you first. So let's go back to March of 2020. You leave Envision to join Peloton. The share price for Peloton is about $20 and there's a $6 billion market cap. July of 2020, you've led a company through a pandemic. You haven't spent one physical day in the office yet, and the Peloton share price and market cap have tripled to over $60 and 18 billion. Yeah. So no doubt this has been an incredibly testing time considering all of those things. Firstly, I just wanted to check in at a more personal level and ask, how have you been coping over the last few months?
Well, I've been busy based on all of what you just shared, but on a personal level, we are very lucky living in Dallas, and family is safe and healthy, and we've been able to, we've got more space in Texas to spread out than a lot of others, so we're good.
Yes, I'm doing this live from my 1,000 square foot San Francisco apartment where I share it with 2 other people. So space is certainly something that is of a premium here. And, we've all had to work through different things. And, I've been doing a whole series on the podcast called Working Through It, looking at all the different ways that we've all tried to work through it during this time. And we're going to be touching on some of the ways that, Peloton has been supporting their employees. But, for those who don't know Peloton, like if I was to kind of try to sum it up, it's a fitness company, it's a media company, and it's also like a logistics company. Like you're physically putting fitness products into the homes of people. So, your employees have had to adapt their employee experience a lot this year. And, from recording new classes virtually in their homes, from safely delivering new bikes to customers to make sure that they're, with everything that's happening with COVID-19. And then obviously dealing with a huge logistics issues in terms of the demand, because, there's been wait lists and people who are all trying to bring that fitness experience back into their home. So let's dive into how you've been supporting your employees during this time, because I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions from people coming through in terms of just how you've been supporting your employees. But first, I wanted to kind of touch on just why I think Peloton is so incredibly lucky to have your leadership. And I wanted to highlight 2 reasons why. Because of where you started your career and also where you were right before joining. So you started your career in the fitness industry where you actually oversaw multiple brick and mortar fitness centers. And I want to sort of first learn, how did your experience actually in the brick and mortar fitness industry set you up for your role with Peloton, which is really the future of the fitness industry?
Well, and I think you're probably being a little kind. It feels like with where Peloton is right now that I feel lucky to be here at an exciting time. But I do know that the company is glad to have me here as well. I think I spent 10 years in the bricks and mortar fitness industry at the start of my career, which was a fluky thing. But I think it gave me great perspective on how special what we're building at Peloton really is. So with that length of time spent in that business, you get to see just how challenging it can be for us as humans to make a routine habit of fitness, health, well-being, and to really just stick with it, right, over the course of a lifetime. And in that 10 years that I spent there, I think there are really 3 thematic things that I saw were present for people who were making that long-term commitment. One was community. So typically in the old model, right, was that people who work out at the same gym as you and you form community there. Second, in a digital world, it would be what we call content, but back in the day we called programming in the fitness business. So this is where folks had favorite classes or favorite instructors or could take advantage of a really robust schedule in order to have the variety in their workout that made them stick with it. And then the last thing was proximity. So this is a little known inner secret of the traditional fitness business. We did know that if we heat mapped active members that made use of the facilities regularly, they came from within a 5-mile radius. Actually, I was in Canada at the time, so technically 5-kilometer radius, which is even shorter, and often even much shorter than that. So in my mind, Peloton, the where that came into play is it helped me see what's special here. And Peloton has that sort of trifecta of a loyal member community, 2.6 million members who would tell you that they're very connected to each other in real and tangible ways, despite the digital nature of it. Content, we've got awesome instructors and a ton of content, and it's really the world-class instructors, which in a smaller town in Canada was not necessarily. I love I love the instructors I worked with, but it wasn't. We were not taking classes with Ali Love, right? And so I think that's sort of a piece of it, and then proximity. I mean, you can't beat in your own home for proximity and being able to use the facilities. So those things, I did think a lot about how that 10-year foundation would really help me at Peloton.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like Peloton's been able to now scale those sort of 3 core principles of what you're looking for from a fitness experience. And I was listening to your CEO sort of speak about one of the promises that you made to people who were signing up is that you would still be delivering new content so that people could still feel that freshness of community and something that was relevant and timely, and that they were flying out huge media production kind of things to instructors in Germany so they could still record brand new sessions from their homes. And it's just been such a fascinating way to make sure that you can still kind of deliver on those sort of 3 core concepts.
Yeah, in many ways, I feel like that strengthened the community. I mean, people felt connection to the instructors and then deeper connection when they're taking classes from, my favorite were Jen Sherman's basement. So that was fun.
So I spoke about how sort of your time at this, in that brick and mortar fitness industry is now really helping you at Peloton, but also I also mentioned the place where you were, right before this, before you joined in March, was Envision. So, Envision, for those who don't know, it's another Culture Amp customer and someone who's been a really leading advocate for remote work, well before the rest of the world kind of had to do it. So how did your experience at Envision, sort of leading the people function there, set you up to deal with some of the challenges that hit you from basically week one of joining Peloton?
It's always weird when when the stories that you didn't realize would be stories about your career choices become really fortuitous. But the concept of remote work was part of what attracted me to Envision. I'm still a huge Envision fan. The attraction wasn't so much for me personally that I needed to work from home or needed to work remotely, but more so that I had been a talent leader in other companies for years, doing the difficult work of having to attract and retain and engage talent to very specific, particular places in the country or in the world. And we would always say that we hire the best talent. But if you think about that critically, I mean, ultimately, really the most you can say is that you're hiring the best talent that you can get to be willing and able to be in the physical place that you need them to be at a particular time. So I have converted a bunch of team members here to using Envision's products. We use Freehand for virtual collaboration. So I'm a fan of the product. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't have joined a company just for the virtual nature, but I was super excited about just the chance to be able to prove the remote work concept at scale. I was predicting that it was going to be impossible for companies to not accept remote work at some point more holistically in the coming years. And then came COVID, literally right on the tail of me leaving Envision. So while Envision led the way, the entire world is now participating in this virtual, this work from home experiment. And we're seeing for the most part, it's working pretty well, right? So the proof of concept is there. I actually started at Peloton. I think I shared this with you when we met earlier that I started the week that we sent everybody home from the office. And so at first I was the person who joined from the completely virtual company. And ultimately, we had an exceptionally impressive transition to work from home from my point of view. I didn't see, coming from a virtual environment, I thought we did it pretty well. I think it's probably due partly to Peloton's culture in many ways. And the team members, our team members love Peloton, so there's a great deal of dedication. I mean, I don't want to say it was easy, but I think we did it pretty well. And ultimately, my time at Envision has certainly been helpful in at least some small way to that.
And you spoke about how sort of, Envision was trying to prove that you can hire talent anywhere and that, you can democratize the kind of human capital market, saying that you can hire great talent anywhere. And I know, even just looking back at sort of Culture Amp's growth story, there's a few famous examples of tech companies coming out of Australia. And one of the, I guess, principles that they kind of said is we want to attract world-class engineers, world-class talent to Australia for this great quality of life and bring all these people down there. And, that was a part of Atlassian's growth strategy and a part of our strategy. And, we've got people from all around the world who've moved to Melbourne to come join us. And I guess now what we've seen is that now it's not about relocating your life to somewhere. It's no, we can just hire great talent anywhere moving forward. And like you said, but there's still a lot of that is an experiment, and we're all learning about what do we need to be prioritizing and how do we actually create an equitable employee experience during this time. And it's certainly been a topic that I've spent a lot of time focusing on the podcast is, what part of this is going to be an experiment, what's going to stay, what do we need to get rid of? So we'll certainly touch a little bit more on that. But you mentioned that Peloton's culture has been one of the core ways that you've sort of really been able to kind of be resilient and also, grow significantly during this time. And, when I think about culture, I think about a lot of the scaffolding, the principles, the words, the values, the things that define a company that says I work for this company that's different from a competitor or different from another company. And then it's about actualizing values, actualizing those statements into behaviors that you can name, see, recognize, and reward. So I'd love to know sort of, how do you think about the Peloton culture and how has it helped you during this time?
Yeah, so like you said, there are some specific elements that are tangible in ways or describable, at least, that make up culture. The way that I think about it here and elsewhere is our shared practices, our shared values, our mission, our purpose. Those define our culture and bring us together so that we have unique individuals with different backgrounds. So culture to me doesn't mean sameness, but we do have a shared identity around being Peloton team members and bringing our unique identities to that. And our culture, I think, here is embodied in the way that we get things done together as both an organization, as a team. And, I'll go to measurement now, and we can go into more depth on the specifics if you'd like now or later in the conversation, but we measure culture in a few different ways. So we're looking at the retention, engagement, the ability to grow as sort of the three factors. Unsurprisingly, we use Culture Amp here. We did at Envision as well, along with ENPS, or Employee Net Promoter Score, to measure engagement. And then on the other areas, we're looking at data relating to retention, promotion, internal mobility, to just give us a more rounded out and holistic picture.
So when it comes to like measuring employee experience, and I guess sort of being intentional about it, sort of what I spoke about at the start is like your employee experience starts, like, in my opinion, the moment you interact with a brand. So, for some people, it might be like, for yourself, you were a Peloton user before you joined the company. So, I think a lot about the experience starting even before that, but, other people might define it as after the attraction or recruiting phase, all the way through to onboarding, engagement, measuring performance, developing, exit, and alumni. And, I think companies should be really intentional about their employee experience. They should sort of put the scaffolding around it to make sure that it's the best experience that it can be. But, you can do all the best work, but then also there's external factors which will end up impacting your employee experience. And I think what we're seeing right now, from the Black Lives Matter movement to the pandemic, is that there's been all these different ways that we've had to adapt our employee experience. And I want to kind of specifically talk about one external event that has impacted the employee experience at Peloton. And it's something that a lot of companies go through, especially if you're more of a sort of a tech company or a high growth startup, is that, you grow, you get market traction, you get funding, and then, potentially you end up IPOing. And that has a really significant impact on the employee experience, because for some people, if they've been there for a long time and they're part of that journey, it's recognition and reward for all their hard work, and maybe they were waiting for it so they could leave. For other people, it's a chance to kind of stay and actually say that, they still want to be part of that journey. But it also can just impact a huge amount of new people joining who are like, awesome, this thing's now like public. I can like get more visibility into how the company's growing. So, as a company that's gone through that IPO, and obviously, like I mentioned, the share price has been skyrocketing over the last few months. How did the IPO and the employee experience kind of potentially change during that?
Well, so I classify myself as one of the new people because I just joined a few months ago. And I think that we do have this really unique time where we're blending together all of the amazing things that made Peloton the success that we are today as a company, and got us to where we are. And those are the folks that are the keepers of the culture in many senses. Like, they're the ones who know what Peloton's culture is. And, and I think it's this blend of, as additional personalities and backgrounds and experiences come to the table, like, what does that new mix look like, and how do we continue to keep that common thread throughout? We've been lucky that we have not had a lot of attrition since our IPO. So we haven't focused on the alumni piece at all. I have done that in other companies that have had like longer lifespans, and they're awesome programs, but I'm grateful that we don't have to focus there just yet. We are definitely focusing because we have to build everything out also, right, from scratch. As much as we've had some pretty strong success in our early days, it is still early days, and we're building foundational elements. So we are much more focused on attraction, hiring, making sure that we're finding talent that's additive to our culture, and then secondarily onboarding. It's onboarding. We believe onboarding is where you set the tone. So when you're bringing so many new individuals into the company and wanting to really preserve that thread of culture, a strong and sort of structured onboarding program, I think, is also something that we've valued pretty highly.
One of the ways that I kind of think about your culture during this time of growth is you need to balance, like you said, bringing in new perspectives, new people, like the culture adds, the ones who will like actually add something new. But then you also need to like balance the people who've been there and the people who've sort of built the foundations. And a term that I kind of talk about quite a lot is the idea of like recognizing your cultural co-founders. and like the people who have the stories and also like cultural artifacts. And I think there's this balance between like not turning your old culture into like a history museum of like, yeah, but we used to do it this way, so like please don't touch it, it's precious, coupled with just like adapting that new kind of thing. So I certainly think that there's a huge power in like naming cultural co-founders, having cultural artifacts, telling the story, making sure that people recognize that like, you know, this value was created during this time because it was unearthed based on something we were going through, and this is how we've actualized it. So people know the origin story. I think that's really important, but that the origin stories don't interrupt the flow of innovation and all the new talent, because you don't want to kind of limit that, because that's the whole reason that you're growing, right?
Totally. And I think we've been very, or I try to be anyways, very intentional in expressing appreciation for all of the things that the people who have been here for a long time can actually teach me about the organization, that can help me navigate. And something I say to my team fairly frequently is, while individuals were here building Peloton to what it is today, and often wearing many hats and doing just a variety of things and being scrappy and doing whatever it takes, I was out gathering a different set of experiences. And so while they have given that time to Peloton to grow the foundation, how can I bring the experiences that I've gained in that same time period to bear to help them continue to develop in ways that they may have missed because of wearing many hats or those things that I just mentioned? And likewise, how can I make sure that I'm learning from them with respect to culture? So I hope it's working, but that's how I think it's a unique balance, right? Because you're also trying to go forward very quickly, grow very quickly, but we are thinking about preserving that common thread without looking for sameness, not trying to, because I think that can also try to fine line between doing that and moving into a world where we hire people who are like us, and that's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to hire and grow our team with folks who have some affinity to our mission, our values, and what we're doing in the world.
When it comes to our employee experience and some of those cultural artifacts, I think, one of the reasons that we join mission-driven companies and ones that have such a strong brand recognition is we do want to be a part of that experience, and we remember those unique moments. And like, I'm thinking back about my time at Culture Amp, we have, I guess, Australian larrikin humor moments built into our culture, whether it's like every new sale, our sales team member has to write a pun about that company. You can't just say new sale, you have to like make it up them. And there's like all these little moments that, can feel small, but actually experience on the daily, weekly, monthly basis. So what comes to mind when I sort of ask about unique employee experiences that Peloton employees experience?
Yeah, and at first I was sort of talking to the team because I've only experienced virtual, right? So I think there are a lot of special in-person moments that I just haven't had the opportunity to experience yet. But then I thought about it, and there actually are some that I have been able to experience virtually. So I think I'll answer this one in that direction instead. We have an all-hands meeting that is once a month, which in itself doesn't sound super special. Lots of companies do that, but I see a level of transparency and information sharing in those meetings that are it's not hierarchical. Like information is shared universally across the team in ways that help every team member feel a sense of belonging and a sense of ability to connect with what it is we're doing as a company, and just a sense of knowing what's going on in a company where things are just growing, evolving, changing so fast, that I think that's been particularly impressive. And we get a lot of great feedback on that because, while companies do that, the messages often are like vastly different for different levels of the organization. And that's just not how we work, right? I think that's really a tie to our Together We Go Far mission value, that it really is a together thing. And that means everyone, not just some people and not just people at certain levels, for sure. Another quick one is I think our team members have real connections to our community of members as well. So through one exam, and that's unique to us because not every company has the concept of members as well. So one of our programs, the Comeback, actually allows our team members to also participate in ways in selecting recipients of bikes who will greatly benefit from those to get back on their journey to health and well-being. And to me, that's sort of a full circle moment that we experience, where we see the lives that our product actually impacts and include our team members in that process.
I love that, because it's that connection back to like why you do what you do, and also the impact that your product has. And I think it's really important to always be centering a lot of your employee experience on, like, there's not just about, how you gather, and it's about like, how you gather to further the mission of the company, and like always connecting back to that product moment or the service or whatever you offer, to make sure that your employees always, remembering like who are you building for, and like what is the impact that it has, because it makes for a much more meaningful experience. There's a question that I just have to ask, because I just want to know whether this actually happens inside of Peloton, and I'll frame it in this way. So when I had a chance to speak to Esther Perel, I spoke a lot about relationship dynamics and how to have really strong conversations, and how to like really think about sort of the relational intelligence and how do you build connection. And something that she said to me when I was sitting down in person with her was like, she said, Damon, if you and I were having this conversation walking, it'd be an entirely different conversation. Right now we were sitting side by side, we were looking at each other, we were sitting quite close, it was quite intimate, and it was a very personal conversation. If we were walking, we'd be taking in the environment, we'd be like, our senses would be kind of going off in different ways. So I was like, yeah, like, and that's why, walking meetings and all that kind of stuff, and like the medium of our meetings is really important. And I know, I've spoken a lot about kind of video call fatigue. So a lot of people are asking whether they can just go for a walk and take a phone call. So the question, all that preamble, I should just get to, how many meetings right now are happening with people on a Peloton bike trying to discuss, actual, business metrics or team culture stuff?
Well, it's funny. As you were talking, I was like, I think I know where he's going, and then I was deciding whether I was going to have to out myself for my own personal workouts on my bike. I am not doing video calls during those workouts. I try to keep the workouts as brief as I can and really hard. And but I do know that people do it. We have lots of partners that we work with that will often mention that they work remote all the time, and so that they do calls on their bikes. And a lot of our partners there's like bikes in the background, which has been a common thread since we've been doing so many video calls. I do think there are teams that do it. And I also know that there has been a bit of inside information on one of our Slack channels. I've seen team members talking about a hack project related, not really a hackathon, not tech related, but about fashioning a desk that can sit on top of the handlebars and allow for that to happen. So I do know it is happening. I just will admit to being a person who does not want to be on video during my workout.
All right. Well, I'll see if I can feature that story of the Peloton desk in a future podcast episode, because it's
coming soon, apparently. Yeah.
We touched on employee values, and I mentioned that employee values need to be actualized; they need to be turned into behaviors. And I think one of the ways that you do that is through stories and through telling stories around like how are these values actually living out. And actually, even just in the Culture Amp all hands this week, Didier Ozinga, our CEO, actually used like the metaphor of a Peloton kind of race, in terms of like, you need people out in front and they take the wind resistance and they lead, and then you kind of go to the back and you allow, we all need to kind of take turns of being able to look after our well-being and our mental health during this time. And so I would love to know kind of just like the values of Peloton and like the stories and behaviors that have been showing up for how you make those real.
Yeah, and I think as I'm thinking about this, there's stories that I've already shared, and I think the true way to fact check whether these are real values or whether they're words that just sit on a wall somewhere. I think I've shared examples that tie back. So members first is our first value, and the comeback example is certainly a way that comes to life. And we do try to really have a connectedness to like who we're building our products for and who our members are. Operating with a bias for action, I think that would be largely impossible to not do with the growth that we've been enjoying. So certainly you see that every day. We had announced the Peloton pledge recently, which was our extended, like on top of what we were already doing, diversity, equity, and belonging commitment that John Foley made publicly, and that my teams had the fortunate opportunity to work on. And we have a long way to go. So with this topic in particular, like I never want to sound like we think we've arrived, but we took immediate action. And within a couple of days of that announcement, we had actually changed one of the commitments was to impact the compensation levels of our hourly team members disproportionately. We had changed like 55% of our workforce's wages within about 3 or 4 days of that announcement happening. So, I mean, but there are countless examples of bias for action for sure. Empower teams of smart creatives. To me, that's the information sharing, the transparency. It's like hiring smart people, giving them the information they need to do their job. One thing I haven't heard here that I think is indicative of this is something you hear in a lot of companies is like waiting on so-and-so for approval. And it's not that we don't approve things here, not that we don't have processes, but I don't hear that coming out in conversation where things are like stuck because people don't feel empowered. Quite the opposite. Sometimes some things take us a little longer as we, work out, communication amongst one another since we're moving so fast and things are changing, but not a lack of empowerment. And then the last one is the big one, probably to your CEO's Peloton example. Together we go far. I think that if I had to choose one value as the banner for how we work, the fourth value tends to be it. It seems to be a bit of an anthem within the company. It's instantly recognizable. Our members recognize it, but our team members recognize it. So it's leveraged internally and externally. And it's a value that resonates with everyone and really means that we're a true team and that we make decisions for the team, not the individual. And I've been really impressed with what I've seen there as a company as well. Like I actually have been, that stands out as one of the things I've been most impressed by is individuals making a decision or taking a path that maybe isn't always the best for them personally, but squarely believing that it's the best for the team and going that route without even flinching is exciting to see and just something that I haven't seen in every company that I've had the opportunity to work in.
When you share that, like the last one really resonates, it also reminded me of the proverb around if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it's about, it's very easy to say things like that or like stories like that, but it's like to actually actualize it. It really means that like you need to look at your decision-making frameworks inside and saying like, is so-and-so going to go work on this project really fast because we need it to get done versus like, what is the long-term impact right now? And I think this has been a fascinating time to balance short-term needs of like being responsive to like everything that we're trying to work through, also knowing that there's still like long-term planning that has to exist and that you do need an infinite mindset to be able to play out as well. So it's been, it's another thing that I sort of touch on a lot is around like the golden side and shadow sides of values. What does it look like when this is working really well, and what is the potential shadow side of this value? Mm-hmm. One of the values at Culture Amp is, trust people to make decisions. And it's around making sure that, like, yes, we need to move fast, but we also need to know that maybe sometimes there'll be someone who, is in the team, needs to make, that decision, even though there might be someone more knowledgeable somewhere else. And, Didi used to always share the story of, he worked in Hollywood visual effects before this. He knows a lot about like screens and like, visuals and all that. But that doesn't mean he should be like choosing what monitors we buy in our offices, even though he's like a world-class expert in color. And it's around moving fast and trusting your people that, that's how we're actually going to, move forward and do the work that we know is important, which goes back to that mission of why we, choose to work at these companies.
Totally agree.
we touched on sort of some of your measurement points of like how you measure your culture and your experience. So I wanted to specifically touch on employee engagement. So I know across the Culture Amp customer base, we've seen a lot of people doing sort of COVID-19 pulses. We've seen a lot of people doing return to work surveys. We've seen a lot of people doing diversity, equity, and inclusion surveys. But usually at the heart of a lot of our surveys and our templates that we have is also just the idea of measuring engagement. And I want to understand, like, what has happened to engagement at Peloton over the last few months?
Yeah, and we have used Culture Amp for both sort of COVID work from home, which I think it has engagement elements built into what we're asking there too, and our normal engagement surveys. So we've continued those two things. I think, or for me anyways, what we saw there was a little bit surprising. And so believe it or not, I'm curious, I haven't talked to many folks about what other companies are seeing, but we do one major survey a year on the main engagement survey, 3 pulses, and our overall engagement has gone up throughout the organization. So I would have hypothesized that maybe for people who were very used to working in person and like all that's going on in the world, and like, does that change things in a negative direction? And it hasn't. And so while we've been super conscious about really doing what's best for our team in this process, we've prioritized their health and well-being, I think. So we've been like an understanding employer, as we should be, and as I think all employers should be. But folks are feeling, I think, much more connected to our mission and our values like throughout this time, partially because of the way that we reacted. But another thing that I can share that I think has been helpful and that we want to make sure to capture if we return to the office is there is a bit of, and we haven't quite gotten a complete picture on this yet, but what we're thinking is that we've had 2 offices primarily in the US and then in 3 additional countries around the world. So we are a global company, and what the work from home situation has done in some ways, a member of my team said, use the term equalize the playing field. And so definitely, I don't think we treated people unequally prior, but what the technology did make it so that on an all hands meeting that's handled virtually, there aren't folks who are there in the room with the executive team and then folks who are outside of the room. We're all in the same virtual room. The chat is like heavily active during the virtual meetings. That doesn't actually exist, right? In an in-person where you're sitting there quietly listening. So there's that level of interaction. So I think a really important thing for us to think about is, although we had high engagement levels to begin with, the fact that this change in that way positively impacted engagement, how do we preserve that, right? It's like something new and unique that we learned about our culture, and how do we use that learning to carry that forward when we go back at some point to working back in an office? Yeah,
there was actually the podcast I just recorded was with Lars Schmidt, and it was about is one of the founders of HR Open Source, and has been collecting all this incredible information about what's been happening during COVID-19, about how companies have been responding. And I think one of the main things that we spoke about is like, what is a temporary kind of solution that we're working to right now that we think is going to go away after this all returns to whatever the new normal is, and what's going to be a permanent thing. And I think one of the things that you touched on there was around really clear expectations of how we can interact as a company when we gather. Like you said, like it used to be just an all hands with like maybe 3 presenters or something, and they're all up there and it's just like one way. Now it's like, no, you have an ability to say like, hey, like we want everyone on, we want cameras on if you can, please like utilize the chat function. And what this does is it really sets expectations around the container of communication and engagement that you want. And I think expectation management is something I always think about, and comms is like tell your employees like you have permission to chat and celebrate and high five and like use whatever it is, whether it's emojis on Slack or chat function in Zoom calls. Like that's going to be some of the artifacts that come out of this, is like, how did you recognize, gather, and share these moments together? Because I certainly feel like our culture has become a lot stronger as well from like increasing comms and like all of us having to gather virtually. And like you said, it's like, just because we're 9 faces on a Zoom wall in the past, that doesn't mean that we've all had the same experience in that meeting. And I think it's being really intentional about who's speaking the most or who's not speaking at all, or who feels more comfortable using a chat function because they like to write their ideas out because that's how they communicate. And I think in many ways, this has leveled the employee experience based on whether you're more introverted or extroverted. And I think what at the heart of that is being really intentional about your employee experience right now and making sure that whatever the circumstances, whatever the flexibility people need, that you're doing whatever you can to create that container where they can come together and have the best employee experience during this time.
Totally. And noticing or capturing what those things are that people are describing. And that's where the surveying has come in for us, is knowing what those things are and being able to not lose them if we go back to a different format, right? Like now everyone's 80%. If you think back before COVID and you had a call, 80% of the people would, or if not more, would be without video. And now it seems more, if there's one person that's not on video, people are like, what's the matter, right? Or recognizing things about people's lives, right? Like if your cat walked across your keyboard right now, right? Like, can I have a human moment with you where I'm like, oh, hey, like, I know, like we're lucky my kids haven't like barged through the door and been, asking for something during this call. And like, we have that human connection that in some ways is more deeply personal than it is in an office, and has that created greater connectedness. That's actually something we thought a lot about at Envision. And those are some of the things where I start to think my Envision background, it could get really, I get really excited about how that could come to bear in this space.
Yeah, we really are tapping into the most human experience that we're having right now. And another Culture Amp customer shared a story with us recently that they hired the new chairperson for their board during the last few months, and they never got a chance to meet her in person. And they were, it was a financial company, like highly regulated. And one of the concerns from the CEO was like, will I really have a chance to connect with her and understand like whether she's the right person to be the chairperson of our board? And then his reflection was, she's taking these calls from her home, like from her bedroom, from like, we're seeing, I'm like, how much more personal can you get than like truly understanding someone in their environment with their family around? And, they did make that hire, even though they've sort of never met. And I think that's what's really getting to the heart of this is like, you don't need to apologize anymore. If you're like, my video is off because I'm homeschooling someone, or, have a young baby who I need to, feed right now. Like all of that stuff used to be things that people would never bring up, and they just try work through it and push through it. Now it's like, no, it's like totally okay just to have conversations about what it means to be an employee right now. And I think that is something that I hope stays.
Well, and I think normalizing that as well for people who still feel are still kind of stuck in that old paradigm and don't feel comfortable, even though we're telling them they should, to basically express what you need. And if your company is offering support, take that support that you need, and don't feel like it's a sign of weakness or a sign of non-performance or any of those things. And I think that's the secret. That's the piece that I think as an industry of like people professionals, we're going to need to unlock moving forward if this continues for an additional length of time to help prevent burnout. Because if you do have a baby beside you, or if you do have a math problem that is not going to be solved without mom or dad, you need a minute to do that for your whole life and like your whole self as a human, right? To be balanced. We're all going to have to figure that out. But I think employers can really encourage that and realize that people don't always feel comfortable sharing that, despite us telling them that it's okay. But like, how can we as leaders make it okay through what we share?
Exactly. I think that's a great point with this. It's like if you're saying that well-being is important and your CEO's never taken leave, or if you're saying that flexibility is okay, yet you're like saying, I'm sorry, you need to be online from 9 to 5. It's like you need to make sure that anything that you say is not lip service and it's actually true to the employee experience. So, Barb, I just wanted to say, like, your experience at Peloton during this tremendous time of growth, as well as your time at Envision, like so many of the stories that you shared have deeply resonated with me, and I'm sure they've been deeply resonating with the audience. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing all of these stories with us today. It
was my pleasure. I enjoyed it. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Matt, I'll throw it back to you.
Echoing Damon's sentiments there. Fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing, and thank you for some awesome questions there. I didn't know where you were going, but how many meetings you've done on a Peloton bike. Fantastic question. I have question envy right there and there. And thank you for your candor, Barb. If I may, I've just got a couple of questions. I could probably go for another 45 minutes, I think, with what came out of that, but I won't. One of the nice elements you touched on quite early on was I was worried the world was going to get smaller. Again, with lack of travel and talent not being able to move around the world, but actually then when you actually pointed to the fact that that we realise now that we can actually hire from anywhere because we have this connectivity. If you've got good connectivity, it doesn't matter where you are based, you can actually join if you've got the same values and skills. That won't be a barrier. So actually, that cheered me right up. So thank you for that. The equalise the playing field. I only just got off a conversation with who will be our last speaker on the summer series at Cisco, and he was talking about that, Barb, around that you'd get opportunities because you're in an office rather than actually what you're capable of doing. And now he's finding, and others within that organisation are finding, that they're getting more opportunities because people are going to the person that does that job, has that role, has those expertise, rather than it's who you know and who you're close to or who you bump into in the corridor. And I thought that was really relevant. Quick question with regards to the engagement going up. Have you done? We had this conversation yesterday with some around the topic of well-being, and we saw that well-being is going down, but engagement scores are going up. And I'll ask you the same thing. Why do you think that is? Why do you think we're suddenly seeing spikes in engagement? Are we doing things more than we have been? Have you been doing more than above and beyond with your employees in the past 3 months?
I think so. And I mean, for us, there's probably a bit of it that's situational with what's been happening in the company, but there's probably a bit of it that isn't just situational and is just people like loving the company and like they're all in. And we are having to remind folks that to be all in for any length of time, right? To be in for the marathon and not the sprint, you do need to take care of yourself first. And yeah. I think our team members are really great about making time for wellness, right? And because of our product. But I think people are giving more than they had in the past in terms of number of hours. And it's just this new work paradigm. Like you have to figure out some practices. And that's an active conversation with our executive team right now is what are the practices that we want to adopt as a company or that executives can adopt or different groups can adopt to be modeling those right behaviors around if people need flexibility in their work schedule and are working at different times of the day because of the baby or the cat or the other examples that we talked about, we're saying that's okay. But then if someone sends an email at night because they're doing that, there should be no expectation of a response to that. And here there isn't. But I think when you have a team of high performers, which we believe we do, folks place a lot of their own expectations on themselves. And I think we're just trying to figure out the ways to release team members of the superhuman expectations that they place on themselves in some ways and keep it real and let them be human and like also illustrate to and model the ways in which we're human too.
And from your side of the fence almost, I think what we've seen is a lot more work go from communication, CEOs suddenly becoming a lot more available to their people. Surveys, all the different elements that are coming out, which I think is then seeing all the things we've been screaming about for years. If you do this, it will pay off. People will buy into it, or they'll become more engaged, more productive. Are now being turbocharged because companies feel like they have to because they're not getting them into the office every day. Do you think that's sustainable at your end? Like all the extra work that you're doing, because I hear that lots of them have never worked harder. And so we also don't want to burn out those people.
We've been talking a lot about that too, right? So we've been really quick to deliver some things to the team that we know they've been asking for and they're needing. But I think the thing we need to be more mindful of, like if we want to say like area of improvement that we need to be more mindful of moving forward is the time it takes to consume all of those great things that folks are asking for. So it isn't just that folks want a different look at how we look at reviews or performance management, right? And that's something we have recently built some structure around. So it's not just that it takes in a lot of companies a long time to build that. We built it really, really quickly in the last several months.
Yeah.
It takes a level of time to like acclimate to that new thing, right? And when the next thing is like right on top of that last thing, like have you even acclimatized to the thing that was delivered before? And that notably, right, I actually answered an all hands question at our last all hands where I acknowledged that very thing to our team, that sort of like cadencing and pacing of like, yes, we're delivering a lot of great things, but is there ever a time where like too much good is just like too much? Like too much of anything is just too much. Too much ice cream, just too much sometimes.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think I don't want to see that it just go bounce back in the other direction with all this great steps moving forward.
It is a fine balance that I will admit to. Like we are trying to strike ourselves, and that's where the constant measurement through our pulse surveys and stuff helps, right? Like you can like tweak a little. Is it working? Is it not working? What's the impact? And you just let your team members' voices be heard and like adjust accordingly and be really iterative in how you approach things. And that's the tact we're taking.
This is a question I haven't asked anybody. It just popped into my head.
Now I'm afraid, but go.
Now it's obviously not, you're not able to do it, but is there an argument to almost enforce a few days leave in these unique times for people so they can clear their head and have a break from work? Is there any way that you'd think that's a good idea?
We actually, so I feel like these are it makes me excited that maybe we're talking about the right things, or like all of our experiences are more common than they are different. We actually have been talking about that. So leaders making sure that they are taking time off. I also think, and I don't know if others are finding this, but for folks who are really truly embracing like shelter in place and not really going anywhere, not going to get on a plane and travel internationally unnecessarily or just for pleasure, like we are not really seeing people like wanting to take time because they're like, what am I going to do? I'm going to stay in my house some more, right? And and so really encouraging people to do it anyway. I do think that when this first started, folks were like, oh, like I'm not going to use my time. We have an open PTO policy here where it's like treat people like adults and they'll act like them and take what you need kind of thing, and balance. But folks are not necessarily taking it as much. And so we have been actively encouraging it. We've even talked in certain teams, like there are some teams employing different practices, like let's all take Friday. On the people team, that gets a little difficult because we're in many ways like a service function to other areas of the organization. So we'll think about it a little bit differently, but it is an active topic. And I do think if no one's taking time, then saying, pencils down, folks, let's all take some time is not a bad strategy. Yeah, no, I think because you just can't ignore the data that's coming out that, we're starting to see some really, big warning signs now around burnout. And as you say, what's the point of having time off if I'm going to be stuck in my bedroom? Right. And there are other things that you can do, right? It's like just take time off and have a you day, right? And just do whatever you want to do where it's not other people asking things of you and arranging that. So I think getting creative. So I think one of the things that we're also talking about is getting like sharing stories, right, within the company, because maybe some folks just aren't inspired and are saying like, oh, I'm just gonna be at home, right? And maybe they can get inspired with something fun to do in COVID times from their teammates. Yeah, no, fantastic. I'm glad I asked that question because I wholeheartedly agree.
Just on that one though, Matt, I think one of the things that's important to call out though is that like one of the reasons that people don't take leave is like fear of economic penalty or performance penalty, thinking that like, who am I to take some time off during a time where everyone's, so stretched and we need to be performing. And, I think another underlying reason why engagement is going up during this time is we also need to think about the economic backdrop. And, two of the questions we ask in our engagement surveys is around present and future commitment. Do you see yourself, are you engaged in your current work, and do you see yourself here in 2 years' time? During a recession, like both of those ones are going to go up, obviously, because economic certainty and employment certainty is incredibly important. So I think one of the benefits of actually enforcing forced time off where it's okay across the board is that like you need time to rest, you need time for your body to rest, you need time to recuperate. without fear of projects being delayed, without fear of your performance being impacted, because, you know, right now people might be working through it just because they are scared that they might lose their job. So I think it's really important for companies to say, it's important for you to take time off. And if it means forcing it, and it's saying very clearly that it won't impact your performance, then sometimes that's the permission as employees we need to hear to make sure it's okay for us to take that rest. Yeah,
the safety and security aspect of it, right? I think that's the case with lots of perks and benefits, is that when folks know that it is like, we love nothing more than team members enjoying the great perks and benefits that we pull together to offer them, to make their lives great, and to thank them for giving their time and talent to the company. But we could echo that more, right? We don't say that in that way every day, for sure.
And I think you mentioned a really key word there, Damon, trust. So, you know, two-way street there, that, you know, people trust their employers that actually, you know, you can take time. We want you to take time. It won't damage you. And then for employers to trust their people to do their job and, and what you've got them there to do. And that's one of the great benefits I think I've seen come out of this, is that trust has been forced upon people who didn't want to necessarily give it freely. So I'm hoping that doesn't go back either. Like I say, I could go on for a long time. It's been a fantastic conversation. There was one last question, if I quickly may ask, with regards to ENPS. Out of interest, do you correlate that through to the customer NPS scores as well, or are there two separate scores you doing?
Yeah, so we know that that there is a connection, which is why we look at ENPS, because if you have a high employee net promoter score, it should be impacting customer satisfaction. From a maturity standpoint and just where we are and like building our foundation, we have, full candor, have not made that direct measurable connection yet, but it is something that we intend to do, because that's why we're measuring it in the first place, is because great and happy employees make great and happy members. We know that.
Well, absolutely. And when you do, I'd love to have that conversation with you, you know, down the line, because I guarantee it will be the case. And last comment, I love the origin story, cultural co-founders, origin story. It's a great way of setting up the whole fact that your company's on a journey. And, you know, now we're going to have a story together with new people coming in. So just thank you so much to you both. This will be on demand from tomorrow. And I hope you both stay, and your family and colleagues all stay safe and well during this period. And hopefully see you in person in the future sometime soon. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.